Hey everyone, this is Liz Bukite of SamiSupplies.com, and I'm here to take you through yet another 4-braid project. If you've been on our site and you've been wondering what all that colored 1mm cord is for, well today the secret will be revealed. We're going to take and do another variation of our 4-braided strand, but this time we're going to introduce a little bit of color. This is going to be a really fun one, so let's get right into it. I've got everything I need for this next project, which is a 4-strand braid, but with the exception of something new and unique. So to begin, we're going to measure out 4 strands of 0.35, approximately 19 inches long here. So we'll have 4 strands of that, and we're going to introduce a 1mm piece of round cowhide cord. Now one thing about this cord is make sure it comes on a coil, so it's sort of like springy. It's really important that you pull this very firmly between your fingers, one way and perhaps another way this way, to take the coil memory out of it. Otherwise, once we put it on our clamp, it can be kind of wrangly. We've got our clamp, put this nice and snug up against the end of our table here with the hole pointing up this way. Take our paper clip. Don't care what color it is, don't care if it's plastic coated, and don't care if it's a plain metal one, but you can just pick whatever side you want here. So for giggles, let's do it this way, and you're just going to make sure that that hook is open vertically facing towards you. I'm taking 2 of my pewter thread strands here, and I'm bordering it on either side of the 1mm leather, just like this. I'm going to smooth this between my fingers, like this, and then we'll move over to our clamp here, and we're going to double this over. Try to get that as even as possible. And we're going to give this a little pinch. I'm going to take my remaining strands, which should be 2 strands, and these will be plain. I'm going to even them up at the end and move that over to the clamp as well, and even them up. And give that a little pinch. With our previous 4-braid projects, you're going to follow exactly the same protocol. The difference is that visually this is going to look a little different because we've introduced this colored cord in the center. So this is going to look like a super hot mess, but don't get frustrated. Grab your colored cord insert sections and crisscross them right over left, and take some time to straighten this out. And that's about where I'm going to leave it right now. And then you can see my 2 strands to the left here are peeking out, and they are ready to make their journey over my colored strand section. And then here are my 3 strands off to the side. And my little sheep out here is going to ba under the black portion here, under the fence, over the hedge. And we're going to pull these 2 sections off to the side. Now remember, this is going to look a little funky, but this is not going to be evident when you put this into the body of your bracelet, and or if you attach the trim to something else. So here we are on our farthest outer ledge. We're going to bring this to the center. Our farthest to the right will go under and over and pull. Now you're going to have to play around with the tension on this just a little bit, because we've got that very, very sort of like stiff 1mm cord here in the center. So just take your time, Weave carefully and make sure that you keep all of your strands side by side so nothing overlaps and you don't roll anything. You want to keep all this very straight. Think of it in terms of like if we were layering ribbon, like we were braiding ribbon, flat strands or flat strips. Here we go. Here's our sheep on the outside. It's going to go under, over the hedge, and remember, wait till you have those two groupings in either side of your hands before you pull. And now we're starting to see a nice pattern emerge. Now this is one of those braids that you probably, if you need to go to the bathroom, answer a telephone call or get a cup of coffee, you want to do that before you start this, because these are one of the tension on this is very important, and it's not something that if you get up and take a break that it's going to look consistent after you return. But while you're braiding, think about different color alternatives or different designs. We offer a wide variety of color cord that's exactly the right diameter, the 1 millimeter size, at samisupplies.com. But you can also introduce other things like beads, silk cord, ribbon, and maybe even other types of leather. But this is one that looks really complicated, but once you get going, it goes relatively quickly. And the design presents itself almost immediately. It's kind of nice to have a little color marker in here sometimes, because if you do something wrong, you can see right away that the pattern isn't correct. And you can undo it and start over again. So under, over, pull, over, under, over, pull. And just make sure that before you pull those sections that everything is nice and flat and all perpendicular. You don't want to roll any of this stuff. So under, over, and pull. Over from the left and under from the right. This style of bracelet is really nice if you don't have a lot of time or you need a quick gift and you don't want to sew the braid onto a reindeer leather strip or wool or whatever it is you'd like to attach it to, because this is the one that has the end caps on it, and that we will address in a separate video. And I'll show you how to attach all of that on once we get to the end of our braid. Remember to finish off your ends here. This is an especially wily one, so you want to make sure that you do this little wrap here. And again, I don't care what you pick, but grab one of these strands and undo the wire down to here. Grab all your little bits and pieces and make a nice fringe. And I don't care if you wrap front to back or back to front, doesn't matter, but you're going to do 2 wraps. We only want to do 2 because if you start wrapping this like a spider, you're going to get a big lump here. So this is just basically to keep everything, it's an assist to keep everything stationary. And then again, I'm going to pull this down and I'm going to cut right here. All right, so here's my wrap and I'm going to cut about right here. And then just for giggles, I'd like to see how tightly I did this. There we go. We're getting like about 6 3/4 to 7 inches of finished length. And remember, these measurements are only specific to the diameter of leather cord we used and the 0.35 diameter of the tin thread that we used too. That will all change if you start messing around or experimenting with different diameters of materials. But I find that a good 19 to 20 inches measurement for most things seems to work just fine. Congratulations! You have completed your beautiful color banded braid. We're going to go through a few of the components now to actually cap these on the end. What a relief, you're not going to actually sew this to the back of a long strip. This is a really good project if you need a quick gift for someone, because we're not going to have to do all of this complex sewing. We're going to be using these two 1 inch by 1 inch squares of leather here. This will be our caps on the ends. We also, remember, have to contend with our loop and our button. So here is my piece of corded reindeer. This will be our loop end. This is our button end. I've already threaded through the piece of matching leather here. And I'm also going to take a little dab of glue and I'm going to glue this shut. Boop, just like that. And put that off to the side. Also have our black synthetic sinew here with our leather needle. Now, I have chosen to do red ends on the back of this black sort of cord here so I can show you more clearly how we're going to stitch this shut. It's kind of like a Nightmare Before Christmas kind of attack to it, but you'll see a little more clearly how these ends will go on. I'm going to begin by taking my cord and doing my stitch through here like we do for our other bracelets. All right, now we've got this portion done, and we're going to start at our loop end here. And so it will be loop to loop, and I'm going to take my 1 inch square, and just like when we use the long strip for our other bracelets, we need to anchor our loop here. I'm going to go down about a 1/4 inch. Right in the middle on the sueded side, there's the polished side, here's the sueded side. I'm going to pull this through. And now we have our loop anchored to our piece of leather. 2 stitches in the same place. And now here's where the fun comes in as far as gluing. You need to decide what side of your braid you want to be the top and the bottom. And remember, one side of your braid will actually have sort of like little puffs here in the center. You can call that your top if you'd like to, or flip it over if you like something a little bit more flat. So I like these little puffs here in the center to be at the top. So I'm going to flip my braid over on its face, and I'm going to line up my end here. Because so we're going to consider this the back of the bracelet. Now I'm going to glue here, just like we do on our long strip bracelet. We already have some tacky glue. And remember, this stuff is very hard to clean up, so you don't need a lot. You need just enough to cover on top of your loop here, your ends. Then you're going to slide your loop up in the center like this and fold this over. All right, now I've got my end glued here, and it feels a little thick in here, but don't worry about that. I'm just going to flip it over so you can kind of see what the front will look like. Now I'm going to flip it back and we're going to start sewing. You're going to be amazed at how fast this goes and how your actual sewing time will be cut down to nothing. You're going to have immediate gratification. So in order to get ourselves acclimated correctly, we're going to make sure that we feed our needle through the loop here. And then I'm going to make just one stitch. Here. I'm going to start stitching now. I'm going to feed this back through again. And you're going to go ahead and start with your small stitches. Now my seam is off center. That's the way I kind of like it. If you're going to be a real perfectionist, you can actually move this seam to the center. And I kind of like this sort of like little herringbone stitch, but if you prefer to do a whip stitch or some other method of closure, as long as this seam is closed up, that's fine by me. Just try to keep things nice, tailored, and evenly separated, and evenly spaced too.
Yeah, okay.
All right, I'm at the very end of my little cap here. And I'm just doing my last stitch underneath. I'm going to make sure everything is nice and straight. I'm straightening my stuff out. All right, now this is super important. You're going to need to, at this point, the only thing holding the braid in place is some glue in here. So we need to anchor this to our actual cap. So you're going to take the back end of your needle and you're going to push it through your braid. Like that. And then you're going to make a really beautiful, nice big stitch. Come up on the opposite side. And I'm going to actually do that again. I like to have two. Again, this is the business end. Don't use this end because you'll cut your thread. You're going to use the eye of the needle. And I'm literally backing it in to the braid itself. All right, I'm backing this up. And it is going to take a lot of strength to push this through. But this will ensure that once you're using your clasp on and off every day, that this will not come apart. All right, I also like to do just sort of a nice stitch in the center. And again, this is going to be a lot of thickness to push through with your needle. Again, be careful of your fingers. And if you can, try to come up near your stitches here. Actually, I'm going to move this a little bit closer. You could even come up on your seam here. So now we have a knot here, we've got a stitch here, and this is in no danger of pulling out. Well, what are we going to do with this thread now? Well, if you'll remember from other projects, or if you haven't done any of our other projects, again, just use the eye of your needle and back this in to the closest stitch. Make a loop, pull it nice and tight, and then I like to actually run this down till it pops up. Oops, got that over my loop. And now I can trim my thread. So there we are with our finished end. Some people will do a couple extra stitches in here for fun. Again, whatever you decide to do, you can trust your own instincts and you can actually kind of make your own signature stitches on here. Some people use a little X, some people make a little cross, whatever, but in most cases, this is how your stitching will look on the back, and this is very, very secure at this point. And now we'll commence to do the other end. Okay, we're almost there. We've got our one end done with our loop, and now we're going to attach the button to this other end. So remember that you've got a front now. This is the front, and this is the back. I've done stupid things like I start to stitch this and I flipped it over, so then I have something opposite going on. So pay close attention that you go back to the back of your bracelet, flip it around, and we're going to take our next square here. And if you'll remember, again, if you have any problems with these steps, you can go to the actual How to Make a Sami Bracelet PDF and look at close-up photos of how to do these steps with the buttons, etc., and the loop as well. But we will fold this lengthwise like this. And I'm going to take my scissors. I'm going to make a very small cut here. Now here's a funny story. For years and years and years, I was trying to always figure out how to get my button through this cut to feed it through, because this has to go into that cut, and I would use a pin and stab myself continuously. One of my very smart students, a fly fisherman gentleman, introduced me to these awesome hummingbird hemostats and said maybe this would work. So we tried it out, made the cut, and what you can do is actually feed this through, open the jaws of the hemostat up, or you can even use a pair of pointy nose pliers. Grab the end of your button tab and pull it through nice and flush. Ta-da! These are awesome. Okay. Next, we're going to take a little bit of our glue, and again, you can use tacky glue, you can use rubber cement, and you can use Elmer's glue if you don't have any of those. And what I'm going to do is just put a very thin layer underneath the end of the button tab here. I'm going to take my bracelet, butt it up there nice and flush. Then I'm going to put a little more glue. This is kind of like making a big glue sandwich. Less is more. And then you're going to press this down. Now be careful when you press the tab down that you don't press it down against the table so hard that you pop the button out. We want this to be nice and flush on the opposite side. All right? And now we're going to actually close the seams up. So you'll need a little bit more glue. All my students know that I prefer rubber cement, but it's a little hard to show you where the glue should go if it's not white. Okay? And now I will close these seams up. We're going to finish this up. Can't believe it, it'll be on my wrist in about 3 or 4 minutes, depending upon how fast I can actually sew. But at this point, remember how we actually started from the top of our loop down to where our braid met our cap? We're going to do exactly the opposite on the button end. And again, these are just techniques and steps that I've developed myself. The thing is, you may think of something better than I have, or do it differently. As long as this braid is anchored in here and you do some nice stitching and anchor your button, you're good to go. So I like to think in terms of this project of being open for lots of innovation. So don't stress out if you're like not doing it exactly the way I'm doing it. But on the button end, I'm going to start by being very close to the braid. I'm just going to pick up this edge here, and I'm going to do this, run a stitch so that I can hide my knot. Again, we're just trying to hide like all of the mechanics of what it takes to make this a wearable bracelet. All right? So the next thing I'm going to do is, remember how we went through and did these 2 stitches down here at this end? We're going to do the same thing down here. Take the eye of your needle and you're going to back it in and like literally make a stitch. And don't worry, you're going to feel the braid in here. You're going to come up on the opposite side. Looks a little wonky, but it's all going to be good. And then you're going to pull that tight. You're going to do it again. Just like that. And even go into the same spot. All right, so I've got my thread coming up in the center. This has been anchored here. And now I'm going to do my nice stitching like I have down at the opposite end. And again, as I mentioned, I kind of like doing this sort of like herringbone stitch. I have to flip the bracelet around in order to get that. All right. I'm just picking up that very, very edge of that seam. And as you can see, if I pull this, it wants to actually pull the seam together nice and tight. Now the success of this is going to vary with how thick or thin these hides are. So it might not be true for every single color or every single thickness, but for the most part, it works out pretty well. And again, I'm doing this in black so you can see the configuration of my stitches. I think they look kind of like little drunken bird feet. And if I pull the thread in the direction of my needle, the seam will want to come together. You kind of get this nice little pillow effect here too. All right, I'm at the very, very end here, starting to look like an actual bracelet, very sassy, red and black. But I do have a couple of things I have to do to ensure that my button stays in. Right now, the only thing holding the button in is what? Glue. So we actually need to do some anchoring stitches here. And what I like to do is when I'm at the very, very end, I usually have one little corner here that needs attention. So I will take my needle and I will bear down and then come up underneath my button. Like this. So I'm putting a stitch through the whole thing. All right. Now something else I like to do is actually do, if you've ever put a button on a coat, this is one of those really nice things that will give the button a little lift to actually fit our loop under here. So I'm actually going to wrap my thread around here a couple of times. And actually I pull this very, very tight. It's like 3 times. I'm going to hold that tight and then reintroduce my needle underneath. Again, try to come up in the center seam on the opposite side. Pull this very, very tight. And then you can see that we get this very, very nice lift in between. Right, now I'm going to go back down into my center of my seam here and I'm going to make, what am I going to do? Another one of these stitches like this. And actually on the button side I like to do 2. Come up through the center seam. And don't be afraid to pull this tight. These can also be very nice decorative stitches too. If for like instance, as I mentioned, you might want to do like a cross. You might want to do a little V shape. And you're going to feel the thickness of that braid in there. And when the needle comes through, just make sure your thumb is nowhere in the vicinity of it. It's an exquisite feeling to run this under your thumbnail, believe me. Center seam. And we have very nice, look at how pretty these ends are. Very, very nice. All right, don't forget, we still have to do a knot. Eye of your needle, back it into the nearest stitch. Make a simple loop. Pull it nice and tight. And don't forget to run your thread down the center seam. And You only have to push it down a little bit. It'll come up on its own. Something else that these are awfully handy for, if you have a pair of pliers, again you can do this with pliers, these are just some fancy hemostats, is you can actually pull the needle through, because by this time my hand's a little tired. And now I can clip my thread flush. And I have my beautiful bracelet. And there you have it. You have about a 7.5-inch bracelet made from a plain 7-inch braid. And you can always shorten the braid if you don't want something that's this loose. It all depends upon how you like your things to fit. So happy braiding! Where do we go from here? Well, once you have your braid secured onto your leather strip, you're going to want to go and download those PDF instructions entitled How to Make a Sami Bracelet. Now, for those of you that purchase a kit, there'll be a code in there where you can get them for free. Otherwise, they are $5. But once you get those instructions, what will happen is that you will find images that will show you step by step how to sew up the back and also how to attach your loop and attach your button. And something else to keep in mind is if you see styles online that you like and you want to order individual materials, think of all of the different combinations and variations that you might be able to explore. But if you have trouble wanting to know like what to measure out or what to get, I'm more than happy to help you with that. You can send me an image, you can leave me a comment, or you can even email me. But in the meantime, try your hand at a couple of these things, and you can also send me pictures of your finished projects. I'd love to see what you're working on. And if you haven't subscribed, please do and get that sweet 20% off your materials. So happy braiding, and I'll see you soon.